You wake up in a world you don't recognize, where every decision could mean life or death. But the cruel twist? You're not a hero, not a mighty wizard. You're a barbarian, the most underestimated class in the game. No skills. No magic. No buffs. Just muscles, blood, and a massive club. But no one expected this, that the weakest class would spark a survival journey full of grit, instincts, and heart-pounding choices. Surviving in the game as a barbarian isn't just about brute strength, it's a story of defying fate, breaking stereotypes, and rewriting the rules of the virtual world. Are you ready to join the main character in smashing through limits and diving into this brutal world? Let's dive in. Ever since he was a kid, games had been more than just a pastime for Lee Hansol. With frequent hospital visits and long days stuck in bed, gaming was his escape, his way of feeling alive when everything else stood still. Right now, Hansol was locked in another intense match, his eyes glued to the screen, fingers moving with precision. But then came that dreaded notification: defeat. His face turned red with frustration. Seriously? Who forgets to heal in the middle of a fight? He shouted, tossing the console aside. His anger wasn't just about losing. It was deeper than that. The truth? Gaming just didn't feel the same anymore. Hansol stared at the ceiling, letting the silence settle in. Once, games had been thrilling, a whole universe of endless excitement. But over time, that magic had dulled. It wasn't about the genre. He'd played them all: action, RPGs, shooters. The problem wasn't what he played, but how every new release felt like a recycled idea. Shallow stories. Predictable mechanics. Nothing fresh. Nothing with heart. As he scrolled through gaming forums out of habit more than hope, he muttered to himself, "Isn't there anything original left?" Then something caught his eye. A new post. A game title he'd never seen before, Dungeon and Stone, published by someone named Oren Gavies. No flashy trailer. Just a quiet announcement buried in a comment thread. Apparently, it was a continuation of a pixel art dungeon crawler from the early 2000s. Unlike today's autoplay snoozefests, this one claimed that everything had to be done manually. Every swing, every dodge, every decision, it was all on the player. Curious, Hansol clicked the link. What is this game? Dungeon and Stone, huh? He had no idea that click would change everything. It was an indie RPG, the kind that rarely saw the light of day anymore. With old-school 2D pixel graphics and a retro side-scrolling layout, Dungeon and Stone felt like a relic from a forgotten era. Hansol squinted at the screen. What even is this? Only available in English, he muttered. Not really my type of game. Still, it was free. No harm in giving it a quick shot, right? He clicked to launch it, and a character creation screen popped up immediately. No skipping, no delay, he had to pick before playing. The options were diverse and slightly overwhelming: human, dwarf, elf, manji, beastkin, and even a mysterious locked class. So many races and job types? For a free game, he murmured. I'm not planning to play seriously anyway, might as well pick something random. Without much thought, he selected a character and started his journey. It had been ages since he'd touched a side-scrolling adventure like this. Guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing, he thought, watching his character move. Hey, that artwork's actually kind of nice. Minutes turned to hours without him noticing. When he finally glanced at the clock, his heart skipped a beat. Wait. It's this late already? What was supposed to be a quick trial had completely pulled him in. Dungeon and Stone had something different, something oddly captivating. The game was packed with magical runes. Some were incredibly rare and powerful, others felt like total junk. At the start, you'd even get a supporting NPC as a teammate. But here was the kicker: if you died, the game didn't let you pick up where you left off. You had to start over from scratch. It was punishing. Brutal even. But it was fun. At least in the beginning. Then came another death. Hansel clenched his fists and yelled at the screen. I was right there. Why did the priest just stand there doing nothing? His shouting echoed through the hospital room. Right on cue, the nurse walked in with a SH. Please keep it down. This is a hospital, not an arcade. Hansel froze like a guilty child. Sorry, he whispered sheepishly. Ah, yes, sorry, Hansel muttered quickly as the nurse walked off. He slipped on his headphones and dove right back into the game. Left, up, down, right. Trap. Again. He kept at it, memorizing patterns, learning from each misstep. The game gave him nothing, no tutorials, no hand-holding. Not in Korean, not even in English. It was just him and the dungeon. Fine, he thought. No matter how long it takes, I will beat this thing. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. He kept playing from that same hospital bed, even as his life moved on. He played while preparing for his civil service duties. He played after being discharged, back home. He played between university lectures, after exams, after graduation. During job interviews. After landing his first job. Whether it was lunch breaks at the office or long nights alone in his apartment, one constant remained, dungeon and stone. He had died so many times he'd lost count. Once, twice, hundreds of times. Bosses. Ambushes. Traps. Miscalculations. But every failure pushed him deeper into obsession. 9 years passed. Then it happened. Hansel sat up, eyes wide, heart pounding. This is it, he whispered. The final room. The gate of the abyss. He burst out laughing, overwhelmed. You guys seeing this? Anyone ever made it this far? 9 years. His entire 20s, gone. Sacrificed to this punishing game. And then, it appeared, a message across the screen. Do you wish to enter the boss chamber? Hansel didn't hesitate. Of course I do, he said aloud, eyes gleaming. But the game wasn't done. Once you go in, there is no return. Do you still want to proceed? Still caught in the rush of victory, he clicked yes without a second thought. Was it because this was the final boss room? Hansel found the silence strange. The air felt different, almost tense. Still, after everything he had been through, there was no way he was backing out now. He wasn't expecting to win in one go, of course. That wasn't the plan. He just wanted to enter, observe, gather every scrap of information he could, then come back better prepared. A solid strategy always started with good intel. As the system cued him into the chamber, he browsed through the game's interface, scanning for clues. What were the enemy's attributes? Any hidden conditions? Surely, there had to be something, some final detail he hadn't seen yet. Hansel chuckled to himself. What if I just beat the boss right here and now, first try, after all this prep? And right then, the sound changed. A low tone echoed from his laptop. The screen faded to pitch black. A few words appeared on the screen, glowing in eerie white. You have reached the abyss. Tutorial complete. Hansel leaned back, confused. Wait. Tutorial? He stared at the message, baffled. Then it hit him. The language on screen had changed. This is Korean. His heart skipped a beat. I thought this game only supported English. I spent years learning the terms just to survive in this world. Before he could process the shock, more text appeared. This time, the screen was no longer black. It turned blinding white. Player verification complete. Hansel blinked, disoriented, unsure if he was imagining things. What is this? Suddenly, the light intensified. An unbearable heat surged through his entire body. His skin burned. His mind screamed. Something was happening. Something real. And then, without warning, the transfer began. His mind felt like it had been torn apart and stitched back together. thoughts blurred, vision faded in and out. And then, a voice. Loud, commanding, unfamiliar. Congratulations, young warriors. Today marks your departure from the sacred grounds. Hansel groaned, still overwhelmed by a splitting headache. Who's yelling like that? As he slowly opened his eyes again, the scene before him made his blood run cold. A massive man stood at the front, arms raised high, shouting to a group of people gathered in a torchlit hall. The room echoed with cheers as others shouted back in excitement. They all looked ready. Prepared. Like they had trained for this moment their entire lives. Hansel, on the other hand, was frozen in place. He looked around cautiously. No electric lights, only flickering torches. No uniforms or suits, just fur pelts, armor, and tribal markings. The people standing closest were tall and muscular, and some didn't even look entirely human. A booming voice cut through the noise. Step forward and choose the weapon that suits you. Hansel blinked. Weapon? What is he talking about? The strangest part wasn't the words. It was the fact that he understood them, even though it was a language he had never heard before in his life. And yet, somehow, it made perfect sense. Panic clawed at the edges of his thoughts, but he forced himself to breathe. Okay, if this is some kind of ultra-immersive tutorial, then first things first, analyze the situation. He lowered his gaze and gasped. This wasn't his body. Thick, muscular arms. Calloused hands. Skin tanned and rough, with strange tattoos lining his forearms. He clenched a fist, then moved a foot. Everything responded instantly. He wasn't controlling a character. He was the character. This body, is me? The voice returned, louder than before. Those whose names are called, step forward now. Hansel's thoughts spiraled. What the hell is Ha? One by one, names were being called. And his would be next. The third son of Van Ong, Karak. A tall warrior stepped forward. His steps were heavy but confident. He scanned the weapon racks with sharp eyes, pausing as he reached out and lifted a massive battle axe. With a single swing, he tested its weight and let it rest on his shoulder. The chieftain gave an approving nod. A fine choice. The axe suits you well. Karak, third son of Van Ong, from this day forth, you are a warrior. The ceremony continued. More names echoed through the air. The second daughter of Fenelon, Ina, come forth. Hansel watched as a young woman stepped forward and selected a longsword. Another chose a spear. Each time, the chieftain would declare their weapon worthy and recognize them as true warriors. Then came the blessing. For these brave young souls, may the spirit of Ravronia guide your path. It was then that something inside Hansel twisted. A chill crept up his spine. Wait. This scene. I've seen it before. He blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of what he was witnessing. The ritual, the names, the weapon choices, all of it mirrored the exact moment when a player chooses their class in Dungeon and Stone. No. This wasn't just similar. This was the game. And then it hit him. When he selected the Manji race. When the game said no turning back. That wasn't just flavor text. That was the trigger. This is real, he whispered, face pale with disbelief. I've been pulled into the game? Before he could process the weight of that thought, a voice beside him cracked with fear. A Manji warrior standing nearby trembled and spoke in a hushed tone. It can't be. This is Dungeon and Stone. Hansel's heart skipped a beat. So he wasn't the only one. Before he could speak, the chieftain's voice thundered across the hall. Who just spoke? The weight of his tone crushed the air from Hansel's lungs. It wasn't just loud, it carried a force that pressed down on everyone, silencing the crowd instantly. Hansel froze. Since when did he? The chieftain's piercing gaze shifted slowly, until it locked onto Hansel. Was it you? His heart pounded, but he shook his head firmly. No, sir. Inside, he cursed the man standing next to him. "Idiot, this is your fault." But the other manji didn't seem to realize the danger he was in. "What? What do you?" The chieftain's eyes narrowed. "It was you." The young man stammered, confusion written all over his face. "Wait, are you saying this is Dungeon and STO?" Steel flashed in the torchlight. The chieftain's axe came down in a single, merciless swing. A head hit the ground before the words could finish. Hansel's stomach lurched. His face drained of color. What the hell? His mind screamed at him to react, but he forced his expression to stay still. One wrong move, one sign of fear, and he knew he would be next. The chieftain spoke again, voice cold and unshaken. "Oromer, son of Kajua, was possessed by a demon spirit. Erase his words from your memory. We will proceed with the coming-of-age ceremony." Hansel swallowed hard, keeping his head bowed. Inside, the truth clicked into place. Rule number 1, anyone like me, anyone who's from the outside world, will be seen as a demon spirit. The second clue was clear to me: if they discover who I really am, I will die. The third clue was even simpler: my head will end up rolling on the ground. The conclusion was obvious. I had to get through this ceremony without drawing the slightest suspicion. The problem was that the chieftain was calling out names one after another. "Next." The fourth son of Zenek, Serum, stepped forward. "Next. Next." Each name came without pause, and my anxiety spiked. I didn't even know my own name in this world. This cursed game, the least it could do was tell me that much. No menu, no status window, nothing. I had no idea what role I'd been thrown into. The calls continued, echoing across the gathering. "Next. Next." I had one desperate idea. When a name was called, I would wait exactly 2 seconds. If no one stepped forward, I'd claim it as mine. It was risky, the name could belong to another so-called demon-possessed soul, but it was my only chance. "Next." The son of Zendel, John. I silently counted. 1. 2. No movement. This could be my name. Or at least, it would be from now on. Keeping my nerves in check, I stepped forward. The chieftain's gaze was sharp, but I met it steadily. "Young warrior," he said, "choose your weapon." Inside, I smirked. Nailed it. The son of Zendel, John, that was me now. The next step was crucial. I needed to make my first real decision in this world. If I lacked any gift for magic, then I would lean into the strength of the Manji people, raw, overwhelming physical power. From the very start, I would shape this body into a close combat powerhouse. For my weapon, I made my choice: a shield. Yes, that was the most sensible option I could take. When the chieftain saw the weapon in my hand, he raised his voice for all to hear. "Son of Janden, Dawn. With this, you are now a warrior." Somewhere far from this scene, inside Li Hansol's room, lines of text began appearing across his computer screen. Synchronization complete. Total item level increased by 24 points. Character information and daily logs have been recorded. Data will be sent to the administrator. John Janden, Level 1. Strength, 25. Intelligence, 35. Skills, 1, item level, 24, up by 24. Total combat power, 67, up by 6. I remembered my first time playing this game. Back then, as a manji, I had picked a greatsword purely because it looked impressive. The result? Death after death. Again and again. I kept asking myself how to keep this character alive longer. I had tried the twin axes, the giant warhammer, even the spiked mace. Every option was just following the usual damage dealer style that everyone played. The problem was, the game wasn't stable for me at all, survival was rare, battles ended quickly and badly. Then, one day, a thought came to me. Why should a manji always be the main damage dealer? The Manji were a race blessed with high vitality and natural strength. While they could not take hits quite as well as dwarves, they still had the core resilience of a true warrior. I never liked this approach. The fighting style it required took too much training. But if I abandoned it now, all the time I had spent studying and preparing would be wasted. So I decided to give it a try. One by one, I cleared the rounds ahead of me. What was this? This character's stamina and abilities were truly overwhelming. My decision seemed to be paying off, so I chose to stay the course. No regrets. Back to the present. Once every Manji warrior had chosen their weapon, the chieftain raised his voice. Open the gates. The rite of passage for the Manji was to step into a labyrinth. My destination inside it would be the city of Ravrunia. Warriors, the chieftain declared, set forth. Your fate awaits within. With that command, the entire group surged forward into the entrance. Li Han Sol, or John, as he was known now, kept his thoughts to himself. He decided to follow after them, but wondered if anyone actually knew where they were going. His suspicion proved right. Before long, the crowd slowed, glancing around with uncertainty. I think we're lost, someone admitted. Voices rose in frustration. Many turned their anger toward Karak, the third son of Venom. He led us the wrong way. He's unfit to guide us. He should take responsibility. John frowned to himself. Wasn't it true they had followed Karak simply because no one else stepped up? Karak's shoulders slumped. Fine. Let's stop here. I admit I'm not capable of leading and I'll step down as commander. Almost immediately, Aina stepped forward with confidence. I'll take the lead from here. Cheers erupted around them. The second daughter of Fenelon, Aina, will lead us, someone announced. She's smart. She'll get us back on track. John studied her quietly, narrowing his eyes. Aina. Not long after, her expression darkened. I think we're lost, she admitted. John pressed his fingers to his temple. So she wasn't the answer either. Frustration rippled through the group. We're supposed to reach Mekong within the time limit. She's not fit to lead us. Let's choose someone else. The next candidate was Jean, the second son of Tekken. Before anyone could agree, voices rose in disagreement. No. I don't think he's the right choice either. While the argument heated, John's thoughts turned sharp. Were these people completely brainless? At this rate, they would never even reach the labyrinth. He had no desire to stand out, but this was going nowhere. Taking a breath, he stepped toward Aina, giving her shoulder a light tap. Hey, he called. Her reply was heavy with defeat. Son of Janden, Lon. Are you here to scold me too? His tone was low and steady. No. I'm here to show you the way to the labyrinth. That caught her off guard. Really? How? John pointed toward a group of explorers moving steadily in the distance. All you need to do is follow them. On the other side, those explorers had already noticed the Manji gathering. Roth, look at that, one of them sneered. A pack of Manji standing around. Muscleheads like that wouldn't be wandering out here at night unless they were lost. Aina's eyes lit with realization. I get it now. Alright, I'll give it a try. Aina broke into a run toward the Manji crowd, her voice ringing out with excitement. I found the way to Mekong. The group erupted in praise. Really? You're a genius. Wise Aina, leading us to glory. John stood off to the side, his expression dark. There were no words left to describe how hopelessly gullible these people were. Without hesitation, Aina took her place at the front. Follow me, she ordered. Soon, they stood before the great gates of the labyrinth. There it is, someone whispered in awe. The sacred battlefield. John's chest tightened. So this really is the labyrinth. Was it a mistake to come here? A small part of him considered slipping away. Nobody would notice. After all, he had been frail all his life. A normal man. Someone who had never once thrown a serious punch, let alone fought a monster. Could someone like him truly survive this place? Yet the thought of leaving was crushed by reality. There was no way to escape the tax imposed by Raphidonia without entering Mekong. That cursed tax. The more he thought about it, the heavier the knot in his mind became. It was one of the game's core mechanics, dungeon and stone. Every citizen of the city was required to pay a tax once they turned 20. Those who could not were executed. There were only a few ways to earn enough money. The most common was to venture into the labyrinth and hunt monsters. The other was to work in places like taverns in the villages. But there was a catch: he was a manji. John could already hear the scorn in people's voices. A barbarian? We don't hire your kind. No way, I'm letting you wreck my property. Go back to the wilderness where you belong. In this world, a manji couldn't take on any ordinary work. That was why the manji were the only race given a weapon from the very start. Without that advantage, he wouldn't even have a chance to face monsters. The gatekeeper's voice cut through his thoughts. 10 minutes until the entrance closes. John stood frozen, caught between stepping forward or staying behind. The labyrinth only opened once a month. Miss this chance, and he'd be stuck outside for 30 days. If the game's rules truly applied here, then finding work was impossible. Even with the rations given by the clan chief, what would happen after a week? And if he somehow scraped by for a month, his situation would only get worse. If he was going to enter, this was the time. But his feet refused to move. This wasn't a game anymore. This was reality. Just then, a voice called out behind him. Son of Janden, Lon. He turned and saw Aina approaching. Daughter of Fenerlin, he greeted. Her brow furrowed. I'm the second daughter, she corrected. Most of the warriors had already crossed into Mekong. Only John and Aina remained, the empty space around them making the ticking clock feel even louder. We have to move, Aina urged. We're late, and time is running out. The gatekeeper's voice boomed again. 5 minutes until the entrance closes. John's eyes drifted toward the gate. It was already shrinking, the opening narrowing with every passing second. He spoke quietly. Go on ahead. I'll follow right after you. Aina hesitated for only a moment before nodding. All right, son of Janden. John. And thank you, for earlier. Still caught in his own tangled thoughts, he replied without looking at her. No need for thanks. She smiled and tilted her head. Then I have a question. How do I become as quick-witted as you? I've never met another manji who could think on their feet the way you do. I want to be like that. John's brow furrowed. You'd have to be reborn for that. Out loud, he gave a vague answer. Think before you act. Aina nodded as if he'd just handed her some great truth. Got it. I'll repay your kindness, if I make it back from the labyrinth. That last line made him glance at her sharply. If you make it back. In the game, the manji were fearless. In real life, they didn't seem much different. He asked her plainly. Aina, are you afraid of dying? Her smile faded. Isn't it obvious? I am. But I was born a warrior. If I don't fight, I'll die anyway. You're the same, aren't you? John's expression darkened. She was right. None of them really had a choice. In this city, survival meant killing monsters, or you didn't survive at all. Maybe that was why the manji learned to push past fear and keep moving forward. Without another word, Aina hurried toward the gate. Just before disappearing inside, she glanced back with a grin. Stay alive, and let's meet again. With his mind made up, John felt a surge of determination. I am a manji too. The gatekeeper's voice rang out one final warning. 1 minute left before the entrance sealed. Mekong was about to close. John allowed a faint smile. Then he sprinted forward. I'm scared, but there's no other path for me. I'm not just a strong manji, I carry the knowledge earned from upgrading thousands of characters. I will survive. Ignoring the shouted cautions from the gatekeeper, he dashed straight through the entrance. A system prompt echoed in his ears. You have entered a level 1 stone cavern. John slowed to a halt, his eyes scanning the strange new surroundings. What is this place? He moved with care, taking in every detail of the cavern. His thoughts sharpened. I'm no stranger to dungeon and stone. That's why I came to this conclusion before stepping inside. If I combine the raw physique of a manji with my game knowledge, I can make it out alive. At least, that's what he had believed. Wandering deeper, he frowned. Damn it, it's pitch black. I can't see a thing. He remembered the confident warriors of the Manji tribe, striding through the labyrinth without hesitation. According to the game's map design, there was usually no need for torches on the first floor, the walls were embedded with glowing crystals. But then a thought struck him. Wait. Don't tell me this is the Dark Zone. The Dark Zone was located on the far outskirts of the first floor, a rare pocket with no natural light. It was never supposed to be a starting point. Then again, this wasn't a game. Here, nothing was guaranteed. Because the starting point in this world was random rather than fixed like in the game, it wasn't impossible for someone to spawn right inside the Dark Zone. Alright, status window, equipment menu, character info, stats, inventory, skills, login log, where are they? He called for each one in turn, but nothing appeared. His face flushed with frustration. Damn it, nothing works. I knew this would happen. Pressing one hand against the cold wall, John began to feel his way forward. The darkness didn't make things any easier. Fine, I'll just pick a direction and move. Maybe I'm too slow like this, crawling might be faster, but I need to stay alert in case. His thought cut off as a sharp jolt ran up his leg. He cried out before he could stop himself. He had stepped into a goblin trap. A cold message rang in his mind. You have triggered a goblin snare. Pain shot through him, forcing him to clench his jaw. Endure it. Stay calm. No noise. Goblins were the kind of monsters that set traps on the first floor. If this one's snare was here, the goblin itself might be hiding somewhere close, waiting for prey. John scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing. Maybe it's not nearby, maybe it wandered off. That thought brought a small wave of relief, dangerously so. No. This is when people get killed. Always assume the worst until you know for sure. If a goblin heard his scream and found him caught, it could just lurk in the shadows, watching until he grew weak enough to finish off. That meant silence was his only defense. Dungeon and Stone had taught him that in moments like this, you do the essentials first. Taking a slow breath, he reached down and began loosening the trap from his leg. His muscles tensed at the sting of the paralytic venom coating the jaws of the device. Damn it, if only they'd given me a pair of boots instead of these worthless sandals. Cursing under his breath, he knew complaining now wouldn't help. Enough of sitting around. Move. If there was going to be a fight, it was better to end it quickly. John forced himself upright. A numbness was creeping up from his right foot, proof the poison was spreading. Dragging one leg, he took slow, deliberate steps, calling out into the darkness, I know you're hiding. Come out already. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if the venom was numbing his fear along with his nerves. If so, maybe that was a blessing. The silence gnawed at him. I said get out here, you miserable little goblin. His voice echoed in the cavern. For a moment, a strange thought crossed his mind. What if there was never a goblin here at all? What if I'm just stumbling around like an idiot? Idiot or not, staying alive mattered more than pride. He kept taunting into the shadows. Fine, hide if you want. I'm leaving. Your mother's a goblin, your father's a goblin, your sister's a goblin, so I guess that makes you a goblin too. Underneath the bravado, panic simmered. His leg was bleeding badly, and the steady loss of blood was clouding his thoughts. The world felt hazy, as if he were slipping into a drunken stupor. Then, movement. A faint rustle broke the stillness. John froze, senses sharpening. Footsteps. Behind him. The creature was closing in, closing the distance it had kept until now. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was there. His only chance was to run. "What's the matter?" he shouted, forcing a sneer into his voice. "Can't stand me insulting your whole family?" He surged forward, pushing his battered body into a desperate sprint. Breath ragged, chest burning, he could still sense the goblin's presence. It didn't rush him. Instead, it matched his pace, keeping just far enough away. It was waiting, savoring the slow collapse of prey that would eventually be too weak to stand. Maybe it wanted to watch him die slowly, feeding off the fear while laughing in the dark. Clever little beast. And arrogant too, it wasn't even trying to hide its voice anymore. Time to change the plan. John forced his legs into a burst of motion, sprinting forward with everything he had left before collapsing hard onto the ground. He let his body go limp, breathing shallowly, pretending to pass out. "There you go. Your prey has fallen. Come closer." As if on cue, the goblin edged nearer. But it was no fool, it picked up a stone and hurled it at his head, testing to see if the corpse would move. The rock struck, making John grit his teeth in fury. "You little rat, throwing stones to check if I'm dead? These things are smarter than most manji I've met." When he didn't react, the goblin finally crept closer, humming some twisted little tune under its breath. That was the moment. John exploded into motion, springing up from the ground. "Hello, and goodbye, you filthy pest." His strike, however, missed as the goblin darted back with infuriating speed. Panic flashed through him. "My arms, they feel sluggish." Then something strange surged through his body, a raw, unfamiliar energy. His limbs moved with a will of their own, his senses sharpening until he could feel exactly where the goblin would step next. "I'm stronger now." He launched a flurry of punches, each one finding its mark, hammering into the goblin's small frame. This wasn't the fragile body that had spent nearly its entire life in a hospital bed. This was the body of a manji. And right now, the goblin was nothing more than prey. John kept striking, each blow landing with brutal precision until the goblin could no longer endure. It collapsed lifeless on the spot. A chime rang in his mind. "You have slain a goblin. EXP +1. As he caught his breath, the creature's body began to dissolve into nothingness. His eyes widened in disbelief. "It's disappearing. Just like in a game." From the fading ashes, a small red stone tumbled onto the ground. John didn't hesitate, he scooped it up immediately. A magic crystal, grade 9, the common currency within dungeon and stone. It's worth about the same as a loaf of bread. All that trouble, for this, he muttered under his breath. Still, that was simply how this world worked. Here, monsters and labyrinths were real. When a creature died, it left behind an item before vanishing. Beyond the maze, in the city outside, other races and familiar landscapes from the game coexisted in the same world. This was without a doubt the very game universe he once knew. Yet he reminded himself, this was reality now, not just pixels on a screen. Dragging his paralyzed leg, John forced himself deeper into the cave. The system's warnings echoed in his head. "You are still bleeding." With his body pressed low to the ground, he crawled onward, each breath more labored than the last. Damn it. I'm not some useless cripple with a broken bone. Yet there was a strange satisfaction in casting aside pride, relying on the uninjured leg alone to move forward. The pain had dulled to the point where John could move faster than he expected. The sweetest part of this change was knowing he wouldn't step into another trap so easily again. Those things were everywhere, and each one grated on his nerves. Another one. His body was accumulating injuries in different places now, but he forced himself to endure them for the sake of survival. The ground beneath him was smeared with his own blood, a constant reminder that his condition was worsening. He needed to find someone, anyone, who could help. Fatigue clouded his thoughts. If he kept walking in a single direction without a plan, he might never escape this pitch-black region. What had happened to that man from before? Was he dead? Or had he somehow returned to his original body? For the first time, John felt he might understand why people turned to religion. When the system displayed his health at less than 5%, there was a strange comfort in having that knowledge, even as death loomed. A new warning appeared. If treatment is not administered soon, the character may die. That was no empty threat, he was living proof of it. Behind him, a faint trail of blood marked his path. He gasped for breath as he looked ahead. It seemed brighter now. Of course, the entire first floor couldn't be swallowed in darkness. If he could just reach that patch of light ahead, maybe there would be someone there. Someone who could help. That hope kept him moving, until a harsh, critical voice inside his mind snapped at him. You think someone's going to help a dying barbarian like you? The voice in his head was sharp and mocking. Are you a beautiful woman? A brilliant man? No, you're just a brute, stronger than most, but still an idiot. John felt as if he was losing his mind. He snapped back at the thought. You're clever enough to insult me. Makes sense, you're me, after all. And what am I supposed to do if I stop moving forward? There are things I still need to do. Hallucinations were creeping in. The voice returned, colder this time. You might find a monster before you ever meet another human. At least I'll be able to see better than I do now, John muttered. His mind felt split in two, each half arguing, yet bound together by the same fragile body. Survive? Look at yourself. How do you plan to do that? Someone. Anyone. Please. Pathetic. You'll be dead soon. Just give up. After that, it'll be easy. Shut up. I'm not quitting. Not for anything. At last, John caught sight of light ahead. The system displayed a cruel reminder, his health had fallen below 4%. Sweat dripped from his face, yet he kept dragging himself toward that glow. Please, someone. Perhaps fate took pity on him. A group of people appeared in the distance, spotting his collapsed form. One of them pointed and called out, Hey, Rose. There's a manji barely clinging to life over there. A manji? The system blared another warning, health below 4%. Bleeding continues. A moment later, health below 2%. Achievement complete. When his vitality dropped below 2%, the system chimed in with an odd reward, his mental stat increased by 1. One of the adventurers approached, his appearance suggesting he was still a rookie. John cursed inwardly. If you know I'm new, why don't you just walk away, you bastard? A whisper came from the group. Suspicious, isn't he? Grouse, who was walking in front, answered, How did a newbie get here faster than us? John tried to speak, but all that came out were faint growls. Inside, he was screaming, Don't just stare at me. Help me. Grouse studied him for a moment, then gave a sly smile. He turned to a robed woman. Priestess Asina, think you can heal this man? The name hit John like a spark of hope. A priestess? If they have one in the party, they must be a high-level group. I'm saved. But her answer was a cold slap. I refuse. Drow, rubbing his chin, asked, Is that so? Then I suppose he won't be getting any help. He glanced at another man. Basran, can you spare one of your potions? Basran shook his head. Only for emergencies when divine power can't be used. You've got plenty, Drow pressed. I'll pay you back when we leave. Reluctantly, Basran handed over a vial. Patron uncorked it without delay. It's not divine healing, so it'll sting a bit. John could only think, just do it already. The moment Grouse poured the potion onto the wound, a curl of white smoke rose into the air. The system's voice echoed in his mind, announcing that his vitality was rapidly recovering. John Janden stared in disbelief. What in the world is happening? A raw, guttural scream tore from his throat as a searing heat spread through his entire body, as if he were melting from the inside. So this was the interest one paid for using a potion outside of battle. The pain was brutally real. The vial emptied quickly, and before long his injured foot was whole again. He pressed his hands to the ground, pushing himself upright, still shaking from the ordeal. I was certain I was done for. Drow extended a hand to him. Now you'll tell us, won't you? How does a rookie get here before us? If you know of a shortcut or hidden path, I'll pay for that information. John finally understood, this was what they were after all along. Kindness without a reason was always suspicious. I don't know, he replied. The moment I stepped into the labyrinth, I found myself here. Drow's eyes narrowed slightly. Is that so? I could swear I've read about cases like yours. Because of irregularities in the labyrinth's dimensions, it's said that, on rare occasions, a person can drop into the borderlands of darkness. The chance is so small it only happens once in a century. John clenched his teeth. Once in 100 years, huh? A quick glance at the group confirmed what he had already guessed. They had both a mage and a priestess, meaning their level was at least mid-tier, if not higher. And yet, on his very first run, he had stumbled into an experience even they had never witnessed. Rouse turned away with a smirk. Interesting story. Thanks for sharing. Before leaving, Drow tossed one last remark over his shoulder. You can go now. Forget about paying for the potion. The words hit John Jan Den harder than he expected. For a moment, he couldn't even respond. In the labyrinth, every minute was precious, and yet they had spent a significant amount of their time on him. That alone was a rare act of generosity. He stooped to pick up his shield. I should be grateful I survived, he thought. But instead of relief, an uneasy knot of resentment twisted in his chest, being pitted left a sour taste. The 5 adventurers resumed their journey. Basran spoke up first. That barbarian sure got lucky. Drow raised an eyebrow. Lucky? He started out in a mess like that. If that's luck, I'll pass. Basran shrugged. If he stepped on a goblin trap on the first floor, even if it didn't kill him instantly, he'd still be a corpse before long. I say he's lucky he ran into us, Basran added. The archer girl snorted. More like lucky he met Drow and not you. You wouldn't even hand over one of your potions. That's because I'm frugal, Basran said with a smirk that practically dripped with smugness. Frugal? Please. You're just cheap, she shot back. Basran chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. There are plenty of fools like him wandering around. You agree with me, don't you, priestess? Asina simply glanced at him, lips pressed together in silence. The archer stepped forward, still glaring. Don't assume everyone's as stingy as you. If it weren't for the temple's rules, she'd have healed him already. Basran's grin didn't falter. Is that so? I've met plenty of people who act all righteous until it costs them something. You've seen it too. The archer girl finally lost her patience and marched right up to Basran, jabbing a finger at his face. You really ought to pick up a thing or two from Charles. Like when he asked if there was a hidden route instead of running his mouth for no reason. Basran barked back immediately, exactly. Because manji types don't like accepting help from anyone. Charles gave an awkward laugh, scratching the back of his neck. Ah, you flatter me. Speaking of which, does anyone know when this guy's bleeding is going to stop? He glanced back at the trail of blood John had left behind. It's been going for a while now, right? The archer shook her head. From what I know about manji psychology, I'd say he's not as lucky as you make him out to be. Basran crossed his arms, confident as ever. It'll stop soon enough. Probably somewhere around here. Drow pointed toward a brighter area ahead. Shortcuts this way. We'll need to turn here. Asina's eyes lit up. Wonderful to have clear directions for once. The archer chimed in with a grin. You should see him, priestess. Drow's got the entire first floor map memorized. Most guides can barely point in the right direction without getting lost halfway. Asina tilted her head, impressed. Is that so? Drow frowned, scanning the area ahead. Strange. I thought we'd be the first ones here. Looks like we beat everyone else after all. He stepped forward and placed his hand on a stone monument. A sudden burst of bright light shot out from the structure's wings. Grouse's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Perfect. This gate will take us to the second floor. Let's move. As the group began to file through, the archer girl, walking near the back, froze mid-step. Her eyes narrowed. Hold up. Everyone turned, puzzled, wondering what she had just seen. She pointed toward a pair of sandals lying near a filthy, blood-smeared trap. Aren't those the ones the Manji was wearing earlier? The old mage raised his hand, summoning a glowing orb of light. I think you're right. The light spread out, revealing a thin trail of blood stretching far into the distance. Everyone froze, momentarily speechless. How long would it take to reach the spot where we first saw that Myzikia? The mage asked Rose. Rose, still recovering from the surprise, hesitated before replying. Unless you take the shortcut, about 15 kilometers. That was enough to make even the old mage blink in disbelief. You're telling me that lunatic walked all that way in pitch darkness? What is he, Pardox? The archer muttered, or just completely out of his mind. She glanced toward Patron, who silently thought, if it were me, I'd spend hours just trying to figure out where to step, and probably still trip over my own boots. Only now did he realize something he had overlooked. Back when they first encountered John Janden, the Manji had extended his right hand toward them, not for help, but to show them the magical crystal he was carrying. Even after crawling all that distance, he had still been guarding his trade item. Patron cleared his throat. I take back what I said earlier. Then he turned to Rose. That wild man, what's his name again? Do you really think he just got lucky? That people like him should die early? Rose shook his head. Not a chance. People that unhinged don't die easily, unless something truly exceptional happens. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how much pain they face, they'll never see death as an escape. The system message kept flashing in his mind, you have slain a goblin. Each time it appeared, another shrieking monster fell beneath his relentless assault. John Janden charged into the horde with sword in one hand and shield in the other, shouting over the chaos, take that, you little pests. Again, the message echoed, you have slain a goblin. Still, more of the creatures poured in from every direction. His body was already soaked in blood, most of it not his, but his breathing stayed steady. At first, he had been tense and uncertain, but now that his vision had cleared and his instincts had kicked in, the goblins no longer seemed so terrifying. He pressed forward barefoot, stepping lightly over crude traps scattered across the ground. Who sets a snare and leaves it in plain sight, he muttered, shaking his head. At least bury it with some dirt, amateurs. Without warning, a goblin with an axe lunged at him from behind. The ambush might have worked on someone else, but John had already noticed its hiding spot. He sidestepped, swung, and ended the creature with a single slash. What are you even trying to do? He barked at the corpse, as if expecting an answer. Then his expression shifted, sharp eyes narrowing as a different kind of trouble made itself known. Hunger. Reaching behind him, he searched for the food pouch the village chief had given him. He was certain it had been packed with enough rations for a week. His hand froze when he felt the torn fabric. The bag had a gaping hole. His face went pale. Oh, come on, seriously? 5 days' worth of food, gone, scattered somewhere along the path. He groaned, realizing he had made the genius decision to set it down earlier without checking the damage. Now, he had just 2 days of supplies left and a stomach already growling like one of the goblins he had just killed. John Janden dug out the last scraps of food from his pouch and shoved them into his mouth, chewing noisily. He kept reminding himself to eat as little as possible, stretching the meager rations for as long as they would last. Even so, he found himself marveling at how delicious the crusty bread was, savoring the way it softened in his mouth. Hunger, it seemed, could turn anything into a gourmet meal. The moment he finished eating, thirst struck him like a punch. That was a bigger problem. Where was he supposed to find water in here? Until now, he had assumed that Dungeon and Stone had some built-in survival system, one that only activated inside the labyrinth. In the game, food alone had been enough to sustain him, so he had never bothered carrying water. Reality was a much harsher teacher. This isn't a game anymore, he thought grimly. It's a real world, and I'd better learn to play by its rules. His eyes swept the area as he kept walking, his mind still tangled in the puzzle of where to find water. The deputy chief hadn't given him any, so the only possibility was that fresh water existed somewhere deeper inside. Then it happened. A faint trickle reached his ears, so soft at first he thought it was his imagination. But it grew clearer with each step, a gentle, rhythmic sound that made his pulse quicken. That had to be water. Following the sound, he soon came to a small clearing in the maze. There, beside a large backpack, stood a lone figure, busy with something that John could not quite make out. The man turned his head just enough for their eyes to meet. His expression was far from welcoming, and in his hand was a water flask, which he sealed shut with deliberate care. John Janden was momentarily taken aback. Aside from the blonde-haired group he had seen earlier, this was the first human face he had encountered since arriving here. Yet no words were exchanged. The stranger simply turned away and walked off without a backward glance. John understood the message. It was the kind of unwritten rule every adventurer seemed to know: avoid unnecessary interaction unless absolutely needed. In the quiet that followed, he crouched down and poured a small pile of crimson gemstones onto the ground. One by one, he counted them aloud: 41, 42, 43, 44. The haul was decent, and for a moment he allowed himself to feel a small spark of satisfaction. But that feeling quickly gave way to exhaustion. A yawn forced its way out of him, long and heavy. He had hunted enough goblins to lose track, yet his eyelids now felt like lead. In a place like this, sleeping was never simple. There were only two options: trust the gods to keep watch over you, or find a companion willing to guard your back while you rested. The second option was a lost cause. He had tried approaching other adventurers before, only to watch them recoil and flee. Some claimed their party was already full, others muttered excuses about having all the members they needed. And then there were those who wrinkled their noses, saying nothing but clearly blaming the metallic tang of dried blood clinging to his skin. He stood there, frozen in place, the sting of rejection still fresh. Everyone had turned him down, and the more he thought about it, the more his frustration boiled over. He muttered curses under his breath. He hadn't even asked to join their parties, just wanted someone to watch his back while he caught some sleep. Was that really too much to ask? A voice called from behind. "Hey!" John turned to see a man approaching, well-groomed, neatly dressed, and carrying a massive hammer slung over his shoulder. His smile was warm, almost disarming. "Looking for someone to keep watch for the night?" the man asked. Still annoyed by the earlier brush-offs, John frowned. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" Unbothered, the stranger kept his polite tone. He guessed John hadn't had much luck finding a guard while he slept. He himself wouldn't mind getting some rest, and John looked like the sort of manji one could trust, though, he admitted with a shrug, perhaps he was wrong. John quickly realized the man meant no harm. "Oh, so that's what you were getting at. You should have said that from the start," he replied, his tone softening. "Yes, I am looking for someone like that." The man's face lit up. "Perfect. Then stay with me tonight. My name's Han." He extended his hand. For a split second, John wondered if "stay with me tonight" meant exactly what it sounded like. The phrasing carried an odd sort of implication that made him hesitate, but Han's expression was nothing but genuine. John reached out to shake his hand. "All right," he said. "I'm John, son of Jan Denver." Han gripped John's hand firmly and said, "All right, I'll just call you John." Ideally, we'd have 3 people for a proper night watch, but finding a third might just be a waste of time. Then, with a strangely unreadable look in his eyes, Han added, "So why don't we just manage with 2? John's expression darkened. What on earth does this guy mean? Is it the way he's saying it, or something else? This is getting weird. Still, despite the odd vibe, John decided to team up with him. Han seemed genuinely pleased and proposed they settle one important matter: who gets to sleep first, by playing rock paper scissors. John sighed internally. Fantastic. This is how we're spending the night in Mekong, playing children's games in the dark. They played, Han won, and John muttered under his breath, "Figures. I never win at this stuff." It wasn't just losing, it was losing exactly the way he expected, which made it even more irritating. Han, in high spirits, handed John a small clock and demonstrated how to use it. "When the shorthand points to 1, wake me up." His tone carried a faint assumption that John, being a manji, might not even know how to tell time. "Got it," John replied flatly. He didn't need the explanation, but Han double-checked anyway, ready to repeat himself if necessary. As John tucked the clock away, one thought lingered in his mind: so this is how people see the manji in Dungeon and Stone. John sat off to the side, keeping an eye on the expensive-looking clock. It gave off the air of something valuable, and he made a mental note that it might come in handy later if things went south. Han was already sprawled out, sleeping like a man without a single worry in the world. John found himself a little envious. Was this what a seasoned adventurer looked like? Calm, confident, and completely at ease in a place where most people would be checking over their shoulder every 10 seconds. His eyes kept drifting to the clock as the seconds ticked by. I wonder if he'd let me borrow his sleeping bag if I asked. Not that he'd try, John was pretty sure Han would say no. The camp was quiet, no goblins, no other adventurers, nothing but the faint rustle of the maze's eerie air. He just wished time would speed up so it could finally be his turn to rest. At last, the shorthand reached the mark. John nudged Han. "Your turn," he said. Han sat up, still half asleep, and asked, "Anything happen while I was out?" "Nope," John replied quickly. "Good. Go get some rest." "I'll wake you in 2 hours," Han said, rubbing his eyes. John nodded outwardly, but inside, his thoughts were less trusting. How am I supposed to sleep with someone I just met guarding my life? Han took the clock from him with a faint smile, clearly pleased that John hadn't smashed it in frustration. John lay down, exaggerating a loud, dramatic snore like some villain from a bedtime story. Hopefully, Han wouldn't notice the act. Through half-lidded eyes, John stole a glance and caught Han smirking, as if silently labeling him the funny one. John was surprised at how easily Han seemed to trust him. It felt almost like magic, as if simply lying there was enough to make the man drop his guard. People often underestimated the manji, thinking they were simple-minded, and John decided to play into that stereotype. He rolled over and pretended to drift into a deep, careless slumber, the kind where you look like a log someone just tossed on the ground. The plan was simple: make himself look vulnerable, wait for Han to reveal any hidden intentions, and then catch him in the act. Except Han never moved. 2 long hours passed, and the man didn't so much as twitch suspiciously. When it was finally John's turn to rest, he was still wide awake, glaring at Han now comfortably snoring. "Brilliant, John. Absolutely brilliant," he scolded himself. I could have actually slept instead of staring at him like some paranoid raccoon. But the truth was, he couldn't sleep until he was sure the man was trustworthy. Unfortunately, his body had other plans. At some point, exhaustion tackled him without warning. When he next opened his eyes, Han was standing right in front of him, calling his name. "I wasn't sleeping," John blurted immediately, trying to sit up with as much dignity as possible. Han didn't say a word, he just pointed at the thin trail of drool still clinging to John's cheek. John froze, wiped it away quickly, and muttered, "Right, maybe I dozed off a little." Han sighed and said it was fine, nothing had happened while John slept, so he would let it slide. John, trying to make up for it, offered to stay awake so Han could rest a little longer. But Han declined with a polite smile, insisting John looked exhausted and should get more sleep while he kept watch. John narrowed his eyes slightly but thanked him nonetheless. From the moment they'd met, Han had been oddly kind, approaching him when he was struggling, forgiving him for dozing off, even refusing any sort of compensation for John's mistake. In the dungeon and stone, John remembered, people like that simply didn't exist. When John opened his eyes again, Han was standing right in front of him, holding John's own warhammer aloft, a sly grin stretching across his face. "Why not sleep a little longer?" Han suggested in a tone that made the hair on the back of John's neck rise. Before John could respond, Han swung the hammer down. But John moved with a sudden burst of speed, the weapon striking only empty ground. He sprang to his feet. Han's confident smirk crumbled into shock. "You dodged that?" John's gaze sharpened to a cold, dangerous glare. Han's breathing quickened, and then came the stammered plea. "Wait, I can explain." But John had no intention of listening. He charged forward, thinking how foolish Han was to try this. In one motion, he grabbed him by the collar and hauled him into the air. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" he growled. The next moment, Han was on the ground, battered and unable to defend himself. His voice trembled as he dropped to his knees. Please, give me a moment, I can explain." Han kept babbling, and John realized one strike wouldn't be enough to finish him. He wasn't like the flimsy goblins that went down in an instant. This one needed another blow. With a roar that shook the stone walls, John bellowed, "Take this, you coward!" His shield slammed into Han's chest with crushing force, sending the man hurtling into the far corner. Han coughed violently as he tried to get up, only to find John standing over him, silent, eyes blazing with a cold fury. The towering Manji loomed closer, his gaze locked on Han like a predator deciding whether to end the hunt. Han's voice cracked as he begged, tears and snot running freely. "I'm sorry. Please, don't kill me." John's tone was like steel as he interrogated him. "Why did you do it?" Han, battered and shaking, fell to his knees and spilled the truth. "Your magic stones. I wanted them. That's all. Please, believe me." John's expression didn't change. "You would kill a fellow human for a handful of magic stones?" Han's crying grew louder. Yes, that's right. And your shield, Manji gear, fetches a fortune on the market. I only wanted to take it." John's voice dropped lower. "I see." Han's eyes lit up, mistaking that for mercy. "Then, you'll let me go?" "I meant no harm, truly." He never noticed that John's foot was already shifting forward, ready to strike upward into his jaw. John could feel it, Han was still hiding something. Without another word, his boot shot forward, smashing straight into Han's face. The man crumpled beneath him like an insect crushed under a steel-toed heel. "I'm giving you one last chance," John growled. "Tell me the truth." In the dungeons, killing another adventurer was a crime of the highest order. For Han to risk that, there had to be more behind his betrayal. Han tried to shield himself, muttering through clenched teeth, "Your heart, it's your heart." That was when the real truth spilled out. "The hearts of your kind are being sold for staggering sums. I heard they're used as a key ingredient in crafting a new spell." John understood instantly. To Han, he wasn't a fellow human at all, just another rare monster, like a goblin, difficult to catch but worth a fortune if delivered alive, or dead. "Then tell me," John asked coldly, "why didn't you kill me the first time I fell asleep?" Han coughed and replied with shameless ease, "Because I needed to rest too. And when I moved, it was just an itch from an insect." His lips twisted into a disgusting smile. "But now I've told you everything. You'll let me go, right?" John's fists tightened until his knuckles turned white. A slow, contemptuous smile crept onto his face. "Let you go? I've met plenty like you. They all say the same thing. Do you think I forgive any of them? His voice carried a weight that could freeze blood. Han shook his head frantically. No, of course not. I'm not like them. Before Han could string together another excuse, John raised his shield high. I'll give you everything I have, Han blurted in desperation. That made John pause for the briefest moment. I mean, not right now, Han added quickly. But once I'm back at base, I'll get it. Just give me one more chance. You won't regret it. Unfortunately for him, John wasn't in the mood for promises. The blow came swift and final, cutting off Han's words forever. A system notification echoed in his mind. Achievement unlocked, first kill. Reward, Spirit +1. 1 day into this twisted game, and he had already taken a life. 2 days later, his character sheet looked very different. Shoulder guards added +13 to his equipment rank. A limited storage backpack was now strapped to his back. His hammer brought the total gear rank up by another +30. Even a pair of leather boots tossed in an extra +5. It was ironic. In the real world, survival had meant living like a barbarian, drinking from a bottle when thirsty, using a compass to avoid getting lost, checking a watch when curious about the time, and patching wounds with bandages and ointment. Now, after killing someone, the system decided he could finally live like a human being. John wandered the dungeon alone, his status reading, Level 1, Strength 25, Spirit 38, Ability 1, Equipment Rank 120, Total Stats 94. Wherever he went, monsters fell. Goblins scattered into dust with a single swing of his hammer. He eyed the weapon and let out a sigh. Honestly, with this thing, I'm starting to feel like I'm cheating, but I'm not giving it back. The goblins dissolved into nothing. John let out a deep sigh as he glanced at his hammer. Should have picked this beauty from the start, huh? He immediately shook his head. No. I don't think I would have been this good back then. It's probably because I'm using a barbarian's body. In battle, it often felt like he was moving in someone else's skin, a body that reacted with raw instinct. Turning to his left, he spotted 2 goblins lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. Without a word, he lifted the hammer. From the second day onward, goblins had begun appearing in pairs. His combat ability had grown with every new weapon he found, and now, to these creatures, he must have looked like treasure walking on 2 legs. They charged at him with reckless greed, but John simply swung once and sent both flying. Progress was coming smoothly, maybe too smoothly. After finishing them off, he was gasping for air. I'm going to die from exhaustion before a monster even gets me. Ever since the incident with Han, he had been hunting goblins without rest. His body screamed for a break. Leaning against the cold wall, he admitted to himself that it might be better to have someone else around, not for companionship, but because an extra pair of eyes could mean the difference between life and death if a goblin managed to sneak up on him. The thought made him grit his teeth in frustration. And, as if on cue, 2 more goblins scurried into view. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, John growled. Every time I try to think for 1 second, you pests show up like clockwork. John roared in frustration, raising his hammer toward the goblins. Can't you pests give me 10 minutes to breathe? Just 10. Without waiting for an answer, he unleashed his fury, smashing the 2 creatures into the ground. Panting heavily, he scanned the area. Everything within sight was now silent and still. In his head, he muttered a desperate plea. Please, no more goblins. Just let me close my eyes for a few minutes. That hope lasted all of 2 seconds before the system alert rang in his ears, warning him that goblins were attacking while he slept. His eyes snapped open just in time to see a jagged blade inches from his chest. There was no pain. Not at first. Just shock. Then the anger came. You little bastard. With one motion, he hurled the goblin across the room. The other goblin, seeing its companion tossed aside like a rag doll, froze in horror. John's glare locked onto it. You're next. But the creature bolted in the opposite direction. He almost laughed, but the truth was he was far too tired to give chase. His body was screaming for rest, and the stabbing pain in his chest was a grim reminder of how close he had come to dying. If he had been a second slower, or if that goblin had aimed just a bit higher, its blade would have pierced his throat. Why hadn't he sensed them coming? The thought stuck in his mind as he pulled out a small vial of medicine. The wound closed under its effect, but the searing pain that came with it made him wince harder than when the blade had actually gone in. 14 hours had passed since he left Han. This was the time most adventurers would be searching for companions, but now that he knew the true value of a manji's heart, trust was no longer something he could give away freely. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, the lack of sleep etched deep into his face. Maybe, if he met another manji, he could still believe in them. Let's go find one, he muttered to himself. On the road, he crossed paths with two strangers. Hey, manji, one of them called out, are you looking for a party? He glanced at them with nothing but quiet contempt. Humans. One of the pair stepped forward, studying him. You look worn out. Want to join our group? They smiled as if offering him a gift, but he kept the same cold stare fixed on them. That would make 3 of us. If you're a manji, we can trust you, the man continued. Humans. Unlike yesterday, now they all seemed eager to have him on their team. He let out a deliberate sigh. No. I'm looking for another manji. Since the injury, he knew he looked far too rough to inspire confidence in anyone else. One of the men tilted his head. You're looking for another manji? That's going to be hard. Why? He asked. They probably moved to the higher floors 2 or 3 months before the coming-of-age festival. There aren't many manji left here on the first floor. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly to himself. In a place this massive, it was ridiculous that he was still wandering the very first floor, chasing after a companion who might not even be there anymore. La Fronia could protect him on the journey, that much was certain. Still, he hesitated. Should he give up the idea of finding another manji? After a moment of thought, he sighed. Fine. Time to be practical. It didn't really matter if his companion was a manji or not. What mattered was finding someone reliable to watch his back. Even if they were human, though he would have preferred someone from a rarer race. At least rarer than humans, but still easier to find than a manji. His footsteps were slow and quiet as he mulled it over. The elves were always shrouded in mystery, the dwarfs carried unshakable resolve, and of course, having another manji would be ideal. But truth be told, most non-human races had some kind of special ability, and unlike humans, they were far less likely to harm fellow adventurers for personal gain. With his mind made up, he began scouting the nearby caves. An hour later, just outside the mouth of a stone cavern, he spotted a lone figure. A woman, mysterious and still as a statue, sat on the cold ground, trembling. Found her. The system's voice echoed in his mind, you have discovered an injured elf. Jandan approached her cautiously. Elf, is it just you here? The woman shrank back, eyes wide, every muscle tense. Fear and suspicion flashed in her gaze. He studied her carefully. Understandable. Anyone wounded and alone would see a towering manji as a potential threat. Narrowing his eyes, he let his gaze fall to the wound on her body, noting the way she tried to hide the pain. The wound was low on her abdomen, and it didn't look like the work of a goblin's dagger. No, this was caused by a sharp arrow, and judging by the blood, it had gone deep. He quickly asked, was this done by a human? The elf woman rose to her feet without answering. Then, without warning, she dropped to her knees before him, her voice trembling. Please, Great One, help me. Jandan blinked, momentarily thrown off. What in the world? Her eyes, wide and pleading, clung to him like a drowning soul grasping at driftwood. Please, spare me. Lord Manji. I still have a younger brother waiting for me at home. I beg you. She must have mistaken him for someone about to kill her, because her expression darkened with fear. What is this? Since when are elves this spineless? In the game, most elves were cold, reserved, even arrogant. Judging by her looks, he had expected the same. If he knew her temperament now, perhaps he could approach differently. A smile might be enough to disarm the misunderstanding. So Janden crouched down, leaning closer, letting a bright, warm smile light up his face. "Don't worry," he said softly. She looked moved, relieved, even, until his expression shifted in an instant, turning sharp and dangerous, his voice dropping with a weight that pressed on the air. "I never planned to kill you." The sudden killing intent in his eyes made her flinch in shock. Liar, she thought, her pulse racing. She looked pitiful, her voice trembling. "I know you are a barbarian, but must you really do this? Please, just this once, let me live." Janden frowned. Her behavior made no sense to him. What have the other barbarians been doing to make her react like this? Was his kind's reputation really so twisted that a single sentence from him felt like a death threat? "TCH, this image of ours is a disaster," he muttered under his breath. He tossed something to her. "Why don't you focus on treating that wound first? We'll talk later." She caught the items, staring at them in surprise, a roll of bandages and a strange green leaf. Her expression wavered. "These are cloth leaves? I thought they might be poisonous." "Use them," Janden said flatly. The elf hesitated, clearly torn, but began tending to her wound. Why give me these?" "Do I need a reason to help someone?" he replied. "Fine, here's one, I'll keep watch while you patch yourself up." "That's my reason." Truth be told, he had a very simple plan: spend the night as allies with this elf. It sounded questionable if said out loud, but compared to what she might have expected, it was far from the worst scenario. Her abdominal injury was severe, and fatigue was already dulling her movements. Despite her beauty, she was in far worse shape than he was. Time passed in tense silence as she worked on herself. Finally, she exhaled. Done. She might actually be quite useful, Janden thought. Her guard seemed lower now. This was as good a time as any to break the ice. He started first. "My name's John, son of Janelle." The elf hesitated before replying. "Owen." They sat down across from each other, the tension still faintly lingering. "So," John asked, "why were you so afraid of me?" "Because I'm an elf, and you're a manji." "And what does that have to do with anything?" "Manji and elves are enemies." John raised a brow. "Ah. That would explain it." Though, honestly, it was the first time he'd heard of such open hostility. Back in the game he remembered, their relationship hadn't seemed bad at all. Owen quickly corrected herself. "No, I mean, the war ended 10 years ago, right? I have no ill will toward the manji." Her tone carried exhaustion and a hint of defeat. "So please. I don't want to fight you." John leaned back in thought. 10 years ago? How much time has passed since the game I knew? Either way, he didn't have the luxury of searching for anyone else right now. "I don't have any hostility toward you either," he said. Her eyes lit up at that. Which was when he added, plainly, "Owen, how about being my partner for the night?" She blinked, clearly thrown off. "Partner, for the night? I'm exhausted. And I'm pretty sure you are too. So why don't we work together, just for today?" Owen hesitated, clearly torn. Owen tilted her head and said, "I've heard the manji value the honor of their warriors above all else. Can you swear, on that honor, that you will not harm me?" John didn't even pause. "Swear. Of course. I'll even throw in my family name for good measure." Honestly, he thought, I couldn't care less about some ceremonial warrior honor. But it does come in handy now and then. "All right," she said cautiously, "but give me a moment to consider it, and please, stop calling me my lady." "I'm not a lord either," John replied. "I'm just John, son of Jan Denver. I don't know much about my own story, but I do know I'm 20 years old and I've been awake far too long." He placed a hand over his chest. I, John, son of Jan Den, swear on the honor of my warriors. Owen clasped her hands together. I, Erwin Fornasai Zetterstar, swear on the name of my tribe. Their voices overlapped as they declared, I swear I will not harm the other for the rest of this night. John exhaled deeply. Finally, maybe I can actually get some sleep. I suppose you'd like me to keep watch then, Owen said with a faint smile. Correct. And here, John handed her a small object. This is a pocket watch. Pretty expensive, so treat it well. She took it gingerly. Understood. I'll be careful. With any luck, John thought, this will be the first uninterrupted rest I've had in days. He lay down with a long sigh, the exhaustion from recent battles pressing down on him. Of course, he wasn't going to trust her completely, not yet. So instead of falling asleep right away, he kept his eyes closed and pretended to drift off. About 10 minutes into the act, he caught himself wondering if maybe he'd gotten a little too comfortable for a man who was just pretending. Sir! Erwin's sudden shout snapped John out of his half-sleep. He bolted upright, blinking. What time is it? He asked, still groggy. It's been 2 hours, she replied, holding out his pocket watch. 2 hours? His eyes widened. When had he stopped pretending to sleep and actually dozed off? Somewhere along the way, his alert rest had turned into the real thing. Maybe it was the combined comfort of his boots and backpack, or perhaps he was just more tired than he realized. Either way, he had to admit that if Han had been hunting him during that nap, he wouldn't have stood a chance. He pulled off his jacket and tossed it to Erwin. Here. You might as well use this. Wrap it around yourself or turn it into a pillow if you like. Huh? But, she hesitated, hugging the jacket awkwardly to her chest before quickly lying down. All right. I'll make good use of it. Thank you. Within minutes, her breathing steadied and she was fast asleep, head barely touching the ground before slipping into dreams. John watched her for a moment, sighing quietly. She must have been just as exhausted as he was, her day had likely been just as grueling. He found a spot on a nearby rock and sat down. The last few days felt like an eternity, 5 days at least, but in truth, only 3 had passed. Still, the weight of everything made it feel much longer. His mind wandered. What's happening in the real world? He wondered. Has anyone even reported me missing? Probably not. Who would come looking for me anyway? The thought left a dull ache in his chest. He shook his head sharply. Enough of that. If I keep thinking like this, I'll lose my will to keep going. After several shifts of keeping watch, it was finally time to move on. John held the pocket watch tightly in his hand. 10 minutes left. He found himself wondering if he should ask Erwin again about staying on as his ally. Being an elf, she would likely take her role in battle seriously. But if they teamed up, he'd have to split the rewards, which meant his own share would shrink. The thought made him glance at the woods. Goblins had been moving in packs for the last 3 days. He could easily handle 3 or 4 on his own. Still, which was worth more, safety while sleeping or the shiny lure of magic crystals? Before he could decide, 2 strangers appeared, walking toward them with hushed whispers. Hey, is that an elf? One muttered. Looks like it. The bow and arrows match the style, the other replied. They stopped in front of John. Hey, Manji. What's the deal between you and this elf? John shrugged casually. Like you said, we're overnight partners. The 2 exchanged amused glances. A Manji and an elf spending the night together? That's interesting. So, how much time is left? John's expression hardened instantly, his tone sharp. I don't owe you an answer. Whatever they saw in his eyes sent them both stumbling back a step. Right, understood. They turned away quickly. Let's go. As they disappeared into the distance, John felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. Something told him those 2 were looking for Erwin. He knelt beside her, shaking her shoulder gently. Erwin. Wake up. She groaned, pulling the jacket over her head. 5 more minutes. John rolled his eyes. This isn't a lazy morning in bed. Get up before your fan club comes back, and this time they might bring pitchforks. John's irritation boiled over. You're about to have people hunting you down, and you still want to sleep? He shook Erwin's shoulder harder. Wake up. She mumbled something incoherent, refusing to budge. That was it. He reached down and lifted one of her legs. It was the oldest trick in the book. A moment ago her leg was limp, now she had it pulled over her face like a blanket. So you were faking it, he said, narrowing his eyes. Erwin bolted upright, startled. Why pretend to be asleep? John demanded, his voice like an interrogator catching a thief. If I got up, she said softly, eyes glistening, you'd leave me behind. The tears caught him off guard. Of all the things he'd expected, that wasn't on the list. They weren't officially allies, but they had shared watch duty through the night, one guarding while the other rested. And by the strange, unspoken rule of that pact, the moment she opened her eyes, it was over. John sighed, hoisted his shield onto his arm, and started to move. What's going on with those two from earlier? Erwin hesitated. Nothing important. Then how did they know you? She bit her lip. Maybe, they're with the same group as the one who tried to hurt me. The emblem on their clothes was the same. They call themselves the Crystal Guild. John cursed under his breath. Not just two troublemakers, an entire guild. This was turning ugly fast. He glanced at Erwin again. She was barely 20. A kid, really. He had half a mind to leave her and avoid the mess entirely, but his feet betrayed him. Fine, he muttered. You're coming with me. They set off together, John speaking over his shoulder as they walked. John glanced sideways at her. So, you want my help? I'll decide after I hear your story. Since we're already behind schedule, you can talk while we walk. Erwin's face lit up at the fact he wasn't leaving her behind. All right. She began explaining, her voice carrying over the crunch of their boots on the uneven path. I first ran into them on my first day inside the labyrinth. We were supposed to be temporary watch partners for the night. While I was asleep, something felt off, so I opened my eyes. And? John urged. One of them smiled and said, Oh, you're awake? You could have slept a bit longer. Later I found out he was the leader of a guild that operates on the first floor. John raised a brow. And you just escaped? Somehow. But ever since then, his guild members have been coming after me. That's when I got injured. John nearly tripped over a root. Wait. How did they keep finding you? I think they're using something called a message stone to track me. A what? John frowned. That wasn't even in the game. She went on. It's a magical device. If you sync 2 of them, you can communicate over a distance, up to 300 meters. John muttered to himself. It was basically a fantasy walkie-talkie. No escape routes, enemies everywhere, and now they had magic radios. If he left her, she'd be caught for sure. He glanced at her again. You didn't do anything wrong, so why are they this desperate to catch you? Erwin's shoulders slumped. To silence me, probably. Then, with a flicker of defiance in her eyes, she continued, but that's not all. The first time I ran away, I threw my dagger without thinking. And it ended up stabbing him right there, Erwin finished. John froze mid-step. Wait. There? As in? Her cheeks flushed, but she gave a shy nod. Yes. You know what I mean. John winced so hard his shoulders tensed. Oh no. She smiled sweetly as if she'd just told a charming anecdote. From what I heard, it was a clean cut. Even with healing potions, they couldn't put it back together. John's hand instinctively drifted toward his own lower region as a chill went through him. That's more than enough reason for them to hunt you down, you lunatic. And you're laughing? Erwin gave a sheepish chuckle. Sorry. Before he could reply, she glanced over her shoulder and her smile vanished. Someone's following us. Don't look back, John said quickly. They're about 150 meters away, she said with absolute certainty. He almost tripped. How can you tell from this distance? I can just feel it, she replied, matter of fact, like it was the most normal thing in the world. John suspected this might be some sort of elf talent, or maybe she was just unnervingly paranoid. They both picked up the pace. We're speeding up. Can you keep going? For now, yes, she answered, though the movement caused her wound to reopen. John noticed but said nothing. She didn't complain, which earned her a silent point of respect. After a few minutes of hard running, John risked a quick question. How far now? Still about 150 meters. He frowned. So even with us running like crazy, they're keeping the exact same distance? That's not the bad part, she said grimly. If they're tracking us and talking to their friends through those message stones, we're probably running straight into more of them. John groaned. Perfect. Just the kind of morning I love, sore legs, mortal danger, and people who want revenge for personal injuries. We needed to deal with them somehow. If I was truly their target, then the choice seemed obvious. But killing that bastard outright would mean there was no turning back. One wrong move, and we'd be buried in consequences. I had to weigh the risks against the rewards. Beside me, Erwin spoke up. To make a smart decision, we need more information. All right, then. What are you best at? I asked. She straightened a little, answering with confidence. I'm great at laundry and sweeping floors. My cooking, not so much. I almost stumbled. What are you talking about? We're in the middle of a fight. Her cheeks reddened slightly. Oh, you mean in combat? I'm good with a bow, and I can use spirit magic, fire element. Now that caught my attention. A perfect elven sharpshooter, and with fire magic no less. Fire was rare, powerful, and dangerous. I felt like I had just found a hidden treasure in the middle of this cursed labyrinth. Have you ever killed anyone before? I asked. The question froze her mid-step. Her fingers tightened on her bow. No, but I can now. Her voice carried a new edge, and I found myself oddly relieved at her resolve. Good. That's what I needed to hear. We kept running, boots pounding against the stone floor. Erwin, how about we make this official? Be my teammate until we get out of this labyrinth. I'll take 9 parts of the loot, you take 1. No complaints. The number was so lopsided her mouth opened in shock. I agree. The gap between us and our pursuers had closed to barely 100 meters. No matter how hard we pushed ourselves, they kept gaining ground. Running wasn't going to cut it anymore. I slowed my pace and shifted into a fighting stance. Erwin, we're changing tactics. Summon your spirit. Without hesitation, she called forth a blazing fire elemental, its body flickering like molten steel. Good. Now, dismiss it. She gave me a quick, puzzled glance but obeyed, the spirit dissolving into a cloud of embers. A faint movement caught my eye, a dark silhouette half hidden behind a boulder in the distance. They had tracked us here without even needing direct sight of us, which meant someone among them was using some kind of tracking magic or skill. Erwin, shoot. She drew her bow in one fluid motion, leapt upward, and released. The arrow whistled through the air and found its mark. I placed a hand on her shoulder as she exhaled sharply. Well done. If you'd hesitated, we might be the ones bleeding right now. We approached the fallen enemy. I crouched down to collect anything useful. A small satchel bulging with magic crystals, 2 daggers with worn leather grips, and a vial of poison strapped to his belt. His gear was mostly leather, light and practical. From the corpse's communicator, a faint voice crackled to life. Sardine, respond. Sardine? He was chasing the elf and that man. All units hearing this, regroup at the goblin sector. I sat on the cold ground, thinking over that name, Sardine. I'd expected better spoils from someone with such a dramatic entrance. Instead, I got, well, this. I was still lost in thought when Erwin stepped back into view, now dressed in a fresh outfit. She turned in a small circle, tugging at the fabric. I changed, but something feels off about it. I cut her off before she could start overthinking. It looks way better than that last outfit you had. Trust me. In my hand, I was turning over a small communication stone, its surface warm and faintly glowing. Funny thing, now that she'd changed clothes, her aura felt lighter somehow, like the air around her had been polished. She was glancing around warily when I held the stone up. So, how do you even use this thing? Erwin crouched beside me, giving it a quick inspection. Find the right spot and press it. That's all. Following her instructions, I pressed down, and the stone immediately crackled with a stranger's voice. Repeating, Sarowin was taken down while chasing that cursed elf. She's in the goblin district now. With the Manji. His weapons are a hammer and shield. The bounty is 10,000 gold. Erwin froze mid-breath. Her face went pale, hands trembling as they moved to cover her mouth. I adjusted my pack and spoke gently. Hey, don't start crying yet. If anything, you should be proud, 10,000 gold means you're officially expensive trouble. She almost smiled through the shimmer in her eyes. Come on, Erwin. Summon your spirit. We're heading to the outskirts before every gold-hungry lunatic in this maze comes sniffing around. We're heading to the second floor, I said, not slowing my pace. Behind me, Erwin almost tripped. Wait, what? Did you just say the second floor? We reached a steep slope, sliding down the loose earth side by side. I landed first, dusting myself off. That's right, I answered without hesitation, still thinking about how she'd called me sir earlier. Erwin frowned. You do know the first and second floors are nothing alike, right? I'm well aware, I replied. If we stay near the entrance, we'll be fine. Besides, you and I, we make a pretty good team. I shot her a sideways glance. Her cheeks flushed instantly. A good team, you mean, like, the perfect combination? In my mind, it was simple, a solid close combat fighter and a long-range damage dealer made for a deadly pairing. Still, I couldn't ignore the truth, on the first floor, teaming up with her didn't give either of us a major advantage. Erwin's voice was soft, almost hesitant. But this is our first time working together. Going straight to the second floor feels like walking into a monster's lair just to avoid a few goblins. Before I could respond, the communication stone in my pocket crackled to life. Still haven't found them? Whoever catches that cursed elf will be rolling in 1,000 gold. The words made Erwin stiffen. I could see the shiver run through her entire body. I kept walking ahead and spoke over my shoulder. Don't worry. I'm not leaving you behind. The voice on the stone returned, now sharper and crueler. Here's a thought, if she resists too much, cut off a hand or a foot. But make sure to keep the important parts intact, you get me? Ha, ha, ha. Erwin's breath hitched. Even with my reassurance, those words burrowed under her skin like ice. She clutched the strap of her quiver tighter, forcing a shaky smile. Sir, let's go to the second floor. His expression turned serious. For once, he didn't need to convince her anymore. He had always enjoyed helping those in need, of course, but only when it also benefited him. All right, he said simply. Yet inside, a sharper thought flashed across his mind. If I can get rid of this troublesome mess and feel good about it at the same time, that's a win-win. No reason to say no. He glanced at Erwin again. She still looked shaken, clutching the communication stone tightly. Without a word, he reached over and switched it off. The silence that followed was almost a relief. They resumed their journey deeper into the dark cavern. At one point, Erwin's voice broke the quiet. Sir, do you actually know how to get to the second floor? John Yenden answered without hesitation. Not exactly. But if we keep moving straight north, we'll get there eventually. These tunnels are built so that if you keep walking in the darkness long enough, you'll find the gate. Darkness, in this place, is the road upward. Erwin suddenly stopped. Wait, sir, hold on. Something in her tone made him freeze. She pointed ahead, her sharp eyes catching something on the ground. In the faint flicker of torchlight, a goblin snare lay hidden under a layer of dust. Looks like they've set traps here, she whispered. John frowned. Strange, goblins rarely appear in well-lit areas. Then an unwelcome thought crossed his mind. If that's true, does that mean I'm just unlucky? Great. Just great. Beside him, Erwin rolled up her sleeves and tightened her grip on her bow. I can deal with it. You should take a moment to rest. He shook his head. Better not use your spirit magic here. You'll need to save that energy for later. Erwin was just about to charge forward with her summoned spirit when his words stopped her mid-step. She froze, a faint blush creeping up her cheeks. Oh, of course, she replied, but the way she said it made it obvious she didn't mean it entirely. John caught the look instantly. She says of course, but her face says otherwise. Erwin trudged forward with a sulky expression, still wondering how he could possibly read her mind so easily. That was when the shadows erupted. A goblin lunged from the side, dagger in hand, its jagged fangs bared. Erwin reacted instantly, twisting out of the way and loosing an arrow that grazed its shoulder. She flowed into the next shot, her movements quick and precise, wounding two more. But these weren't ordinary goblins. Even injured, they snarled and came at her again, claws slashing through the air. Before they could close the distance, Robin appeared behind them, her bow drawn. In 3 swift shots, the creatures collapsed to the ground. Lowering her weapon, Robin turned to John with a bright, expectant smile. So, how was that? He gave her a level look. You did well. You really are a talented and kind-hearted elf. Her eyes lit up at the praise, and John couldn't help but think she might be braver, and perhaps even quicker, than he had first assumed. Reaching into his pouch, he pulled out a magic crystal and offered it to her. She took it with no hesitation, grinning. That makes it 9-1, right? Her eyes sparkled as she added, you know, my little sister always begged me to go on an adventure like this. If we keep performing like this, I might actually be able to save up a decent amount. John just gave her a half-smile, unsure if he was more amused or worried by her optimism. John almost flinched, wondering if she had just insulted him, but all he said was, "You've worked hard." Robin, smiling as brightly as ever, replied, "Then I'll just work even harder." Before he could respond, John activated the communication stone again. A cold voice echoed from within. Update. The bounty on the elf has been raised to 20,000 gold. Dead or alive? The cheer vanished from Robin's face in an instant, her expression going pale. She moved closer, practically walking in his shadow. John reassured her, "Relax. No one's going to track us in the dark. And besides, those bastards don't seem all that organized." The voices from the stone kept coming, now with a disgusting tone. "I'm moving over to the Sharpmane Wolves. Anyone want to join me for a break?" John smirked faintly. "See? Not everyone's interested in chasing you." Still, something about the situation felt off. Everything had been going too smoothly, and by now, some kind of trouble should have appeared. He slowed to a halt. Erwin, startled, blurted, "What is it?" Then she froze and shouted, "My lord!" Up ahead, a group of ghouls shambled into view, their hollow eyes scanning for prey. Neither of them had expected to see ghouls here. On the first floor, monster spawns were supposed to vary depending on the path taken, and these creatures were normally found far to the south. A grim thought struck John. Don't tell me we've wandered too close to the border. From behind, Robin's hesitant voice broke his concentration. Am I fighting them alone? John's grip tightened on his weapon. No. We fight together. The dungeon and stone system had its quirks. Experience rewards were only granted the first time you defeated a particular type of monster, meaning the fastest way to grow stronger was to take down as many different creatures as possible. And these ghouls would be a first for them. This was exactly the kind of situation John liked: clear objectives and an advantage on their side. The plan was simple. He would take on the ghouls charging from the front while Erwin handled the stragglers in the rear. No hesitation, no wasted time. John recalled a certain rule from the game's mechanics: if this truly was the same system, ghouls would not attack unless you entered a specific proximity. Unfortunately, once they caught the scent, they swarmed in at full force, lunging straight for him. Just as expected. With a shield in one hand and a hammer in the other, John charged, meeting the creatures head-on. "Where do you think you're going?" he barked, slamming one into the wall and pivoting to crush another skull. The ghouls were faster and stronger than goblins, but still manageable. Even when a few tried circling around to ambush him, they were quickly intercepted by Erwin's precise strikes from behind. With her watching his back, this fight was almost effortless. The system notification appeared before his eyes: "You have defeated a ghoul. EXP +1. They pressed northward, day after day, until the third morning. That was when they noticed it. Dark stains mottled the earth ahead. Robin crouched down to examine them. "My lord, this is blood, but I doubt it belongs to goblins." "Who do you think left it?" She pointed to crumbs of bread scattered nearby. John narrowed his eyes. "The trail's leading exactly where we want to go." Yet a fragment of doubt lingered. He remembered places like this from his earliest days in the labyrinth: blood-slit paths, hidden traps waiting underfoot, and beyond them, the gate. Suddenly, the gate appeared before them, its surface glowing with a sharp, silvery light. For a moment, John just stood there, stunned. Memories of the past days came flooding back: every exhausting battle, every scrape with goblins, and his expression twisted into sheer disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he growled. Erwin jumped at the outburst. I'm sorry. I don't even know what I did wrong, but..." Without replying, John slammed the head of his hammer into the ground with a heavy thud. The truth was almost insulting. The entrance to the second floor was only 10 meters from where he had first started. He rubbed his temples, teeth clenched. Of all the cursed luck. I had to pick every possible wrong turn before finding this. Erwin looked at him with wide, puzzled eyes. "My lord, if I did something..." He sighed and waved it off. "This isn't your fault." "Then why?" she began, tilting her head, clearly trying to piece it together. She glanced at the trail they'd followed, the breadcrumbs, the discarded sandal, and then at John's weary expression. Her voice softened. "My lord, you've been through so much. You must have lost dear companions here." John froze for a heartbeat. Wait, does she think? Yes. She did. Completely. And she was wrong. Still, he didn't correct her. Instead, he looked her in the eye. "Regardless, will you keep going with me?" Erwin's face lit up with a mix of fear and determination. "I may be scared, but I don't think I'll die if I'm by your side." She really does talk too much, John thought. Not that he planned on dying either. Together, they stepped toward the gate. The glow swallowed them whole. If you think this video is insanely awesome, don't forget to like and subscribe, and turn on the bell to catch all the latest updates.